It was supposed to be a day filled with joy. Veronica was turning 35. She wanted to spend her birthday surrounded by friends and family, but despite the outward perfection, an emptiness had been growing inside her. Her marriage to Scott, which had started like a fairy tale, now felt like a silent storm. The emotional distance between them had become unbearable. Veronica had spent the entire week preparing for this day. The table was perfectly set, decorated with fresh flowers and sweets she had made herself. A birthday cake, a gift from her close friend Linda, stood at the center, glowing with a single candle, a symbol of hope for better times. When Scott walked into the room, something felt off. He was wearing his usual suit, but he avoided her gaze. In his hands, he held an envelope instead of a gift. Veronica tried to hide her unease. "You're just in time," she said with a smile that never reached her eyes. Scott hesitated before stepping closer. He placed the envelope on the table next to the cake and took a deep breath. "Veronica, we need to talk." His voice was firm but carried a hint of uncertainty, something she had never heard before. Guests had begun arriving, and Veronica glanced around, feeling confused. "Now? Can't it wait until tomorrow?" She tried to laugh, but Scott's expression made her swallow the sound. He shook his head. "It's important. Please." Reluctantly, she picked up the envelope and opened it with trembling hands. What she saw left her speechless. Divorce papers. She looked up at Scott, her face frozen in disbelief. "You're filing for divorce on my birthday?" Her voice was louder than she intended, drawing curious glances from the guests who were already taking their seats. Scott remained silent, his expression a mix of guilt and determination. The air seemed to leave the room. Veronica felt a flood of emotions: anger, pain, and most of all, humiliation. The woman who had worked so hard to build a life with Scott now watched it crumble in front of everyone. She placed the papers on the table with controlled movements, took a deep breath, and lifted her chin. "All right, Scott, if this is what you want, we'll deal with it. But not today. Today is my day, and I won't let you ruin it." With that, she turned to her guests, forcing a smile. "Let's celebrate." Veronica knew she was falling apart inside, but she also knew this wouldn't be the final chapter of her story. After the guests had left, the house felt quieter than ever. Laughter and conversation had filled the space, but they couldn't mask the emptiness left by Scott's betrayal. Exhausted, Veronica sat at the kitchen table. The divorce papers still lay there, a cruel reminder of what had just happened. The barely touched birthday cake now seemed like an ironic symbol of a day that should have been sweet. After a while, Scott walked into the kitchen. He had changed into casual clothes, but his posture remained tense, as if bracing for whatever she might say. "Why now, Scott?" Veronica asked, her voice low but full of emotion. "Why did you decide to do this on my birthday, in front of everyone?" Scott avoided her eyes, fiddling with the glass of water he had taken from the counter. "I thought this would be better, more direct. I didn't want to drag it out any longer." Veronica let out a hollow laugh. "Direct? You think humiliating me in front of our friends and family is the most direct way to handle this?" Scott sighed, finally meeting her gaze. "Veronica, we both know this has been over for a long time. There's no happiness left. I just thought I was doing the right thing." "Right thing?" The words escaped her before she could stop them. She felt tears welling up, but refused to let them fall. "If you truly believed this was the right thing, then you never really knew me, Scott." For a moment, silence hung between them. It seemed like Scott wanted to say something, but then he changed his mind, as if realizing that anything he said would only make things worse. "I'm going away for a few days," he finally said, standing up and grabbing the suitcase that was already packed in the living room. "I think we need some space." Veronica watched as he walked out, closing the door behind him. She didn't try to stop him. Instead, she allowed herself to feel the pain she had been holding back since she first saw those papers. But even through her tears, something new began to grow inside her. Determination she never knew she had. Scott had made the first move, but she wasn't going to give up so easily. "If he thinks he can just walk away from me like this, he's dead wrong," she whispered to herself, wiping her tears and standing up. The clock on the wall struck midnight. A new day had begun, and with it, a new Veronica was born. Veronica woke up the next morning with a heavy weight on her chest. The house, once their shared home, now felt cold and empty. Every corner reminded her of the love she had thought was forever, but which had suddenly ended. She walked into the kitchen, where the divorce papers still lay on the table. Looking at them hurt, but it also ignited something inside her, a desire to fight back. She wouldn't let Scott control her life. With a cup of coffee in hand, Veronica picked up her phone and began typing a message to her best friend Monica. She needed support, someone to help her process everything. "Monica, I need you today. It's urgent," Monica replied almost instantly. "I'll be there in 30 minutes. Right on time, Monica walked into the house, bringing with her the warmth and energy Veronica desperately needed. After hearing everything that had happened the night before, Monica was in shock. "He did this on your birthday? In front of everyone? What kind of person does that, Veronica?" Veronica sighed. "I don't know, Monica. I thought that despite our problems, he at least respected me, that he had some decency." Monica placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You deserve so much better. Don't let him get away with this so easily." Inspired by her friend's words, Veronica began to think about how to turn the situation around. She knew she couldn't erase the public humiliation Scott had put her through, but she could prepare to handle it with dignity. "I'll give him an answer," Veronica said firmly, "but not the one he expects." Monica smiled in support. "That's right. Show him he can't break you." That day, Veronica began putting her life back together. She carefully read through the divorce papers, took notes, and started researching her legal rights. Despite the pain, she knew she had to be ready for whatever came next. At the same time, she couldn't stop wondering why Scott had changed so much in recent months. The constant business trips, the cold stares, the emotional distance, it all started to form a bigger picture. "Do you think there's another woman?" Veronica asked hesitantly. Monica hesitated before answering. "Veronica, I don't want to plant unnecessary suspicion, but men like Scott don't make decisions like this out of nowhere. There's probably something he's not telling you." Those words echoed in Veronica's mind. If there was a secret, she would find out the truth. And when she did, she would make sure Scott knew he couldn't fool her. That night, Veronica decided to take action. She called Ethan, an old friend who worked in private security, someone she could trust. "Ethan, I need your help to find out the truth about Scott. I feel like he's hiding something big from me," she said, keeping her voice steady. Ethan hesitated. "Veronica, you know I don't like getting involved in personal matters, but for you, I'll do it. Give me a couple of days." By Monday, Ethan had news. "Veronica, I don't even know how to say this, but Scott has someone else. I traced some of his financial transactions, and he's been spending money on dinners and trips that have nothing to do with work." Hearing it confirmed felt like a punch to the gut. But instead of breaking down, Veronica's resolve only grew stronger. "I knew it. I always knew something was wrong," she said, her eyes burning with anger. Ethan, who had known her for years, recognized that fire in her eyes. "What are you going to do now?" he asked. Veronica took a deep breath. "I'll wait for the right moment. He humiliated me in front of everyone, Ethan. Now it's my turn to show him who's really in control." In the following days, Veronica continued living her usual life, but with newfound confidence. She began meticulously planning every step. Meanwhile, Scott acted as if nothing had happened, convinced that she had accepted his decision. One rainy night, while reviewing the divorce papers again, an idea struck Veronica. A barely noticeable smile appeared on her face. She knew exactly how to turn the situation in her favor. Her strategy would not only bring justice, but also put Scott in a position he never expected. She made a few phone calls and started executing her plan, the beginning of an unexpected resolution. Scott might have thought he had won, but Veronica was ready to prove that he had seriously underestimated the woman he once called his wife. The morning after her realization, Veronica woke up with a surprising sense of calm. She was more determined than ever. Her plan was beginning to take clear shape, and she knew that every step had to be carefully thought out. While Scott carried on as if nothing had changed, Veronica decided to turn the game around. She started smiling more, going out with friends and displaying a confidence he didn't recognize. This threw him off, but he said nothing. That same day, she met with Monica. Her always supportive friend was eager to know the next step. "So, what's the plan?" Monica asked, taking a sip of coffee. "First, I want to make sure Scott continues to think he's in control. He must believe that I'm calmly accepting everything. Meanwhile, I'll be gathering all the evidence of what he did in our marriage and his financial affairs," Veronica explained. Monica smiled. "That's brilliant. He has no idea what's coming." But Veronica's plan went even further. In the following days, she carefully started gathering information about Scott's new partner. After some digging, she found out that it was Pamela, a woman known in the city for her ruthless ambition. Veronica saw a unique opportunity. She reached out to Ethan again. "I need you to find out everything possible about Pamela, any details that might be useful," she said. As always, Ethan worked quickly and came back with crucial information. "Looks like Pamela isn't as reliable as Scott thinks. She has a history of manipulating wealthy men for financial gain. A few years ago, she was involved in a fraud scandal that got covered up." Veronica couldn't hold back a smile. "That's exactly what I need." Meanwhile, Scott started noticing changes in Veronica's behavior. She had become more confident and distant, and he couldn't understand why. One evening, he tried to talk to her about it. "Veronica, you've been going out a lot lately. Is everything okay?" She responded with a mysterious smile. "I'm wonderful, Scott. Just enjoying life." Her answer puzzled him even more. Scott had no idea that Veronica had already set the next phase of her plan in motion. Using Ethan's information, she began subtly exposing Pamela's involvement in Scott's business affairs to the right people. Veronica also sought out a renowned attorney, a specialist in complex divorces. She was determined to leave this marriage without losing what she rightfully deserved. At home, she continued to play the role of the obedient wife, cooking dinner, engaging in casual conversations with Scott, and pretending to be unaware of anything. But every moment was part of her strategy, and the tension between them was slowly but surely growing. One evening, while Scott was out, Veronica found a document hidden in his drawer. It was a power of attorney giving Pamela access to their joint account. Her heart pounded as she realized she had just found the final piece of her plan. Closing the drawer, she looked at her reflection in the mirror and whispered, "You underestimated me, Scott. That was your biggest mistake." In the following days, Veronica was filled with new energy. Now that she held all the cards, she knew the time for action was near. But to execute her plan perfectly, she needed the right conditions. Scott continued his usual routine, confident that he was still in control. Meanwhile, Pamela became more visible in his life, constantly calling and messaging him. Veronica watched silently, not missing a single detail. That evening, she invited Scott to dinner. "I thought we should have an honest talk. Just the two of us," she said with a soft smile. Scott, surprised by her initiative, agreed without hesitation. The table was set perfectly: candles, wine glasses, and a carefully prepared meal. Veronica knew this moment required composure and precision. During dinner, she spoke in a casual tone. "You seem happy lately, Scott. It's nice to see you like this." Scott smiled, but a flicker of concern appeared in his eyes. "Yeah, everything's going fine." Veronica tilted her head slightly, pretending to show genuine interest. "And how's work? Any interesting projects?" "Oh yeah, lots of work. You know how it is," he replied, trying to avoid details. Then Veronica shifted her tone, gentle but firm. "You know, Scott, I've been thinking a lot about us, about how we ended up here." He stopped cutting his food and cautiously looked at her. "And what conclusion did you come to? That maybe you're right. It's time for us to go our separate ways." Scott's face showed surprise. He hadn't expected such an answer, especially in such a calm tone. "I want you to know, I accept the divorce," Veronica continued. "But before I sign anything, I want to make sure we both walk away from this fairly." Scott tried to hide his relief. It seemed like things were going easier than he had expected. "Of course, Veronica, I want this to be as smooth as possible for both of us," he said. Veronica smiled, but inside she knew this calm wouldn't last much longer. The next morning, she met with her attorney to initiate the final part of her plan. "I want him to lose control over his finances, at least temporarily, until everything is settled," she explained, showing the power of attorney she had found. Her attorney was impressed. "This can prove that he acted dishonestly, transferring assets to Pamela. This gives us significant leverage. Meanwhile, Scott received official notice that his assets were frozen for legal review. He tried calling Veronica, but she didn't answer. When he finally managed to speak with her that evening, his voice was tense. "What does this mean, Veronica? Freezing my accounts? You had no right." "I have every right, Scott," Veronica replied firmly. "You did this to yourself when you decided to betray me and underestimated my intelligence." Scott was furious, but Veronica remained calm. She knew the game was shifting in her favor, and for the first time in years, she felt in complete control. Scott was now trapped. News of his frozen accounts spread quickly among his lawyers and business partners. The pressure was mounting, and he struggled to keep his composure. Meanwhile, Veronica stayed focused on her strategy. Over the next few days, she gathered every possible piece of evidence, financial documents, recorded conversations, and messages that could work in her favor. Every small detail mattered, and she meticulously prepared for the upcoming confrontation. Pamela, who had previously felt secure with Scott, started to panic. Her hopes for financial stability were crumbling, and the thought of being dragged into trouble terrified her. One evening, as Scott tried to grasp the severity of his situation, Pamela showed up at his house. "Scott, we need to talk," she said, her voice tense. "Not now, Pamela. I'm trying to fix this," he snapped. "And how exactly are you going to do that? You promised to take care of everything, that I wouldn't have to worry." Scott rubbed his temples, feeling a growing headache. "I'll find a way. I just need time." "Time?" Pamela crossed her arms, staring at him. "And in the meantime, I'm supposed to suffer the consequences of something that isn't even my fault." Their conversation turned into a heated argument, exposing the cracks in their seemingly strong relationship. For Veronica, who was receiving regular updates from her lawyers, everything was going according to plan. Now it was time for the final move. While Scott was trying to handle the crisis, Veronica met with her lawyer for a crucial discussion. "Based on the evidence we've gathered, we can secure very favorable divorce terms for you," he explained. "I don't just want fairness," Veronica replied firmly. "I want him to feel the consequences of his actions, to face the full weight of every mistake he's made." That evening, Veronica took an unexpected step. She called Scott. "I want to talk to you in person," she said, her voice calm but resolute. Scott, though wary, agreed. The next day, they met at a restaurant they used to frequent in the early years of their marriage. Veronica looked flawless, her confidence evident in every move. "Why here?" Scott asked as he sat down. "Because I want you to remember how it all started," she answered, looking straight into his eyes. The conversation started cautiously, but soon Veronica laid her cards on the table. "I know everything, Scott, about Pamela, the transfers, how you planned it all." Scott opened his mouth to protest, but Veronica cut him off. "Don't worry, I won't stoop to your level. But know this, this is the last time you'll ever think you have the upper hand over me." She stood up and walked away, leaving Scott sitting alone, confused and anxious about what was to come. As she stepped out of the restaurant, Veronica felt stronger than ever. She knew the battle wasn't over, but she was ready for whatever came next. The following days were tense for everyone involved. Veronica focused on finalizing her strategy. Her legal team, strengthened by financial experts, worked to expose Scott's financial misconduct in court. Meanwhile, Scott was feeling the growing pressure. Pamela, who had once seemed confident, began to distance herself. One morning, as Scott was reviewing documents with his lawyers, she showed up for a blunt conversation. "I can't be part of this anymore, Scott," she said without hesitation. "What do you mean?" he asked, trying to stay calm. "You promised stability, said everything was under control, but clearly you've lost control, and I'm not going down with you. Pamela, don't be ridiculous. This is temporary." "Temporary," she repeated with a bitter smile. "You really think I'm going to stick around while your ex-wife destroys everything you've built?" Scott felt irritation rising inside him. "I don't need your advice on what's happening." "And I don't need you dragging me down with you," Pamela snapped, grabbing her purse and walking away, leaving Scott alone with his anger and frustration. Meanwhile, Veronica got a call from her lawyer. "We have everything we need," he said confidently. The next step was court, but Veronica had other plans. She knew a legal battle could be exhausting and drawn out, So she decided to meet with Scott one more time, face to face. She arranged the meeting in a neutral setting, a mediation office. When Scott arrived, his face showed a mix of exhaustion and distrust. "Why am I here?" he asked as he sat down. "Because I want to settle this directly," Veronica replied. She presented a set of documents detailing his financial misconduct and suspicious transactions over the past few months. Scott read them in silence. "You think you can blackmail me with this?" he finally asked. "This isn't blackmail, Scott. This is justice. I want what's rightfully mine, and you know I have every right to it." The conversation grew tense, but Veronica remained calm. She knew she had the upper hand, and she intended to use it. In the end, Scott had no choice but to concede. He signed an agreement granting Veronica a fair financial settlement and control over part of the business they had built together. As they left the office, Veronica felt a wave of relief. This wasn't just about money or assets. It was about reclaiming her dignity and her voice. As she walked to her car, her phone rang. It was Pamela. "Why are you calling me?" Veronica asked, surprised. "I just wanted to say thank you for showing me the truth about him." Veronica paused for a moment. "I didn't do it for you, Pamela. I did it for me, for who I am." With that, she ended the call. Veronica knew this chapter of her life was finally coming to a close. As a soft breeze blew through the air, she drove home, feeling free for the first time in months. Did you enjoy this story? We'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment below. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to join our amazing community. And don't forget to check out the other videos we've created with love just for you.